Let us look into the question number 11. How does the networking work for an Azure virtual machine? So here, primarily they are looking to understand, do you have a networking skill to manage Azure virtual machine? So maybe the interviewer is trying to understand, do you understand the components behind the Azure virtual machine, which makes the networking possible, things like that. So let me populate the short answer first, then I'll give you the explanation. The short answer is each Azure virtual machine is connected to a virtual network, or we call it as VNet, and can communicate securely with other resources. What you see on the screen right now are some of the components part of this virtual network. So let's go through these each components one by one. First, what is this virtual network or VNet? So if you remember, when we created this virtual machine, I think the third or the fourth tab after the disk was selecting the virtual network. We didn't spend enough time there, but I just showed you on a super high level what it is. So at any point in time, if you feel like these questions are not showing enough practical things, this is not designed as a practical session, then I can never finish it. You can always refer to my hands-on videos or the certification courses, which has a lot of practical details. So here, this is a theory part which explain how you can answer these questions in a theoretical way to the interviewer. So what is virtual network? Virtual network is the something which you create to isolate the network environment for your virtual machines. So if you are trying to host your application, you want to segment these into different networks. Virtual networks allows you to isolate this network by creating different environment. And this enables communication between the virtual machine and other Azure resources within the VNet. So if you put a virtual machine in a virtual network, any other resources residing in that virtual network will be able to communicate to each other. But at the same time, if the resources are staying in a different virtual network, unless and until you create a different flow path or the communication happen between these network, the resources will not be able to communicate to each other. So that is something you need to keep in mind. Second, it enables and supports creating subnets. Subnets are a mini virtual network you can create within a primary virtual network, which will allow for further network segmentation. So if you want to have a primary segment of virtual network, and then you want to have categorized into tiny subnets for different groupings within your organization, then you can select the subnet part of the virtual network. Now let's look into the second component, that is public IP address. Public IP address allows internet access to the virtual machine if you assign it. So without assigning a public IP address, you can't get the internet address. So you need to go and assign it, or you need to look at other mechanisms on how you can provide internet access. Are you allowing it? Are you blocking it to your virtual machine? And these public IP addresses can be a static or a dynamic one. This provides you flexibility in terms of network configuration. And another key component of public IP address is this is important for hosting web services or applications accessible over internet. So if you are creating an application and your users need to be connected over the internet, then you need to make sure that you have public IP assigned, which you can take either static or manual. The third component is Network Security Group or NSG. I kind of showed you this as well while creating the virtual machine. So what is this NSG or Network Security Group? This acts as a virtual firewall for your virtual machine. There are various firewall services you can adopt within Azure, including Azure Firewall itself. But if you don't want to do it, but if you want to take help of a virtual firewall for your virtual machine, like a mini firewall, then you look into the Azure Network Security Group or NSG. This helps you control the inbound and outbound traffic to and from your virtual machine. And this uses security rules to allow or deny traffic based on certain factors. These factors could include source and destination IP addresses, protocol, is it a TCP or UDP port, or do you want to block or allow these traffic based on a port number? And then there is a direction. You choose Do you want to flow the traffic direction inbound or outbound? It's a good topic to look into. If you are quite not familiar with it, just read about network security group. The next component I want to talk about is Azure Load Balancer. This Azure Load Balancer distributes the incoming network traffic across multiple virtual machines. This ensures high availability and reliability for balancing the load of your application. This supports public and internal load balancing. So not only you can have the load balancer looking into traffic coming from external thing that is public, like to your website, or if you have an application which is hosted for your internal services, you can have an internal load balancer looking into internal traffic as well. And this Azure Load Balancer has features such as Health Probe to monitor the status of the virtual machine and automatic failover to a healthy virtual machine. If there is something wrong with a particular virtual machine, it can do that failover smoothly for you. So these are on a high level what the networking work for you can think of for an Azure virtual machine. Next question is question number 12. What are the different storage options available for Azure Virtual Machine? So when we created this Azure Virtual Machine, I kind of showed you the second part where after selecting the name and things like that, you had a place where you can choose the disk or the disk type of the storage options available. What are the options available? Let me populate the short answer first. Azure Virtual Machine uses primarily managed disk for storage, and these managed disk come in different shape and form. So I will help you understand what are these in detail. And then there are additional storage options with Azure Blob Storage and File Storage. These storage are not directly attached to the server directly. So you can have these services attached as a side service to the Azure virtual machine. To help you understand a bit better, let me take you through this one by one. So first, let's look into what is a premium SSDs. Premium SSDs provide you high performance and low latency storage. This is primarily good for mission critical workloads. These premium SSDs are really good to get consistent IOPS and throughputs, and this can support large databases and high transactional workloads. So if you are looking for high performance, low latency, high throughput, then look at leveraging premium SSDs within your Azure storage. Let's look into the second option, standard SSDs. Standard SSDs are really good for balancing your cost and performance. This is suitable for any sort of general purpose workloads, gives you better performance than your normal hard disk, but at a lower cost than a premium SSD. So where is it ideal? This is ideal for web servers and lightly used enterprise applications is where I would recommend using this. Third option is the standard offering called standard hard disk. This is a low cost storage option, mostly suitable for less performance sensitive application, best for backup and archive solution, and this provides sequential data access. So this is the cheapest option. So if you are looking for high performance, look at either standard and premium SSDs. Then I kind of mentioned two additional storage. We will go in detail about these in the upcoming slides especially when we go through the storage part. But here I just want to mention a couple of things. First, what is this Azure Blob Storage? Blob storage are primarily used for storing large amount of unstructured data, and this supports data lakes and big data analytics, things like that. Azure Blob Storage provides scalable, durable, and secure storage, and this offers different access tiers to optimize cost and performance. And what is Azure Files? Azure Files are managed files in the cloud, and this is accessible via SMB or NFS protocol. This is primarily good for like any SMB solution where you would have seen or heard about map drives within your organization. So this is something which you can use to replace that. And this is integrated with your Azure backup for data protection. And this supports scenarios like file server migration and dev test environments. Let's look at question number 13. How do you secure an Azure virtual machine? So primarily looking at security part of Azure virtual machine. Let me populate the short answer first. There are a lot of ways you can secure that. Depending on which one you pick, you can give a good explanation on that. So these are on a high level. You can either use Azure Bastion, just-in-time access, network security group, Defender, patches and update. So I'll help you understand what are the talking points you can use depending on what path you choose. You don't have to necessarily talk about all these points. You can probably pick one or two and explain that. First, look into what is Azure Bastion. Azure Bastion provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machine directly in the Azure portal. So you don't have to have a separate tool installed to take a remote session of your Azure devices. You can use Azure Bastion to do itself. Second, it eliminates the need for exposing a public IP address to your virtual machine. Otherwise, you need to have a public IP address or a DNS referring to connect into the virtual machine. Third, it acts as a jump box. Jump box is a term we use as a mechanism to connect into another services with a hardened and fully managed service. So look into Azure Bastion if you have not heard of it. The next way you can secure your virtual machine is using just-in-time or JIT VM access. So if you enable this just-in-time VM access, this restricts RDP SSH access to your virtual machine to only the time you need it, thus reducing any sort of exposure to attacks and things like that. And this allows you as an administrator to specify who can access your virtual machine and how long they can access it. You can define those parameters. And finally, this reduces any sort of attack that could happen by closing the RDP and SSH port when not in use. The next is network security group. We talked about in detail on this couple of questions ago. Network security group allows you to control incoming and outgoing traffic to and from your virtual machine network interfaces, and this allows you to create security rule based on source and destination IP address or port or protocol, things like that. And this enables you to enforce and control network traffic at a sub level or like a subnet level as well. Next is Azure Defender. So if you enable Azure Defender, this provides advanced threat protection across your Azure and your on-premises workloads. Azure Defender can be used to detect and mitigate threats with behavioral analytics and machine learning. And this offers real-time alerts and detailed incident reports. And the last one is a tip. This is not a solution. This is basically everybody should be doing this, irrelevant of you have solution or not. It's called regularly applying patches and updates. Ensure your virtual machines are protected against the latest vulnerabilities and threats. You can actually automate the process of applying patches and update using Azure Update Management, so it automatically does it. When you do that, make sure you schedule maintenance window to minimize any sort of downtime and disruptions caused by not having access to that server and things like that. Let's look at question number 14. Here we are going through a detection method to find an answer. Which of the following features help ensure high availability for an Azure virtual machine? So we are going to look into high availability for Azure virtual machine out of these four options. Azure availability set, yes, that is the correct answer. The first one, Azure availability set. Let's populate our answer. Yep. So Azure availability set is the correct answer. So what is Azure availability set? Azure availability sets distribute your virtual machine across multiple fault and update domain, ensuring redundancy using hardware failures and maintenance. So I use a couple of terms like fault domain and update domain. So what is a fault domain? Fault domain are when VMs are placed in a different fault domain, protecting them from simultaneous hardware failures. And update domain isolation is when the VMs are placed in different update domain, ensuring that not all virtual machines are updated simultaneously, thus by reducing downtime during maintenance. And whenever we use this Azure availability set, Microsoft guarantees us 99.95 SLA for virtual machine uptime. So this can be used to enhance your application reliance, a cost efficiency mechanism because it minimizes the risk of downtime, and it provides a lot of comprehensive monitoring as well. So that is the correct answer. The other options were Azure Virtual Network, that is a virtual network service, not a high availability service. Azure Resource Group is a grouping which we can put together for all the resources. Azure Active Directory or Entra ID is for identity service. The correct answer is Azure Availability Set. So that concludes the Azure Virtual Machine part. In this particular section, we are going to go through Azure App Service. This is a platform as a service offering. Here we are going to go through web apps, API apps, things like that. And we have 8 questions to go over different scenarios. Let's look at question number 15. What is first Azure App Service and what are its key benefits? So let's populate the short answer first. So I'm going to just read this out. Azure App Service is a fully managed platform for hosting web application, RESTful APIs, and mobile backends. Azure App Service supports multiple languages including .NET, Java, Python, PHP, and Node.js. This is good. So what are its key benefits? The key benefits of Azure App Service are it is fully managed. So if you remember in the first or second question, I talked about shared service models and different cloud models. We talked about IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Azure App Service comes under platform as a service offering. So that means Microsoft provide you a fully managed service. So you don't need to manage the underlying infrastructure, scaling, or updates. Microsoft does that for you automatically. Then other key benefit of Azure App Service is its built-in security. So this supports authentication, encryption, compliance baked in. So you just need to configure that to leverage it. The third key benefit is Azure App Service offer you scalability options. So it can automatically scales application based on traffic demand, ensuring optimal performance during your peak time and cost efficiency during low traffic periods. I can go on and on. Few other examples which I can think of is benefit is integration. Azure App Service integrate with wide variety of DevOps tools, databases and APIs. High availability is another option because this ensures that the built-in load balancing and automatic failover capabilities reduces any sort of downtime, and this improves the user experience. So just look into these key benefits. Just first and foremost understand what is app service and how it differentiates from the infrastructure as a service. Once you understand that, then you can easily answer this particular question. Some of the examples of use cases are you can use Azure App Service for web application or API hosting or mobile backend. So web application is a web application which you can probably host it like an e-commerce website or things like that. API hosting is you can manage the RESTful API that can be consumed by various clients including web, mobile and IoT applications. Or third is the mobile backends. This develops a robust backend for mobile application ensuring reliable data storage and processing. Let's look into question number 16. How do Azure Web Apps and Azure API Apps differ? So it's a comparison. The interviewer is trying to understand, do you understand what is web apps and API apps? And then additionally, do you know what are the comparison or main differences between these two? So let's populate the short answer first. Both web apps and API apps are part of Azure App Service, but they serve different purposes. Let's look into these purposes first. Web apps are primarily used to host website and web application. API apps are used to host RESTful APIs and microservices. What are the supported frameworks for web apps? It supports .NET, Java, PHP, Python, Node.js. For API, it's .NET, Java, Python, Node.js, not PHP. What are the integration options available? Works with the Azure SQL, blob storage, and content delivery network. And API apps work with Logic Apps, Power Automate, and API Gateway. Let me give you a few more talking points for the web app. So let's understand web apps a bit more. What are the features or the benefit of web apps? It provides you scalability to meet your user demand. It provides built-in security like SSL and TLS. It integrates with GitHub, Azure DevOps, and other CI/CD platforms, and this supports for custom domain names and SSL certificates. Some of the examples of Azure Web Apps are your corporate website or e-commerce platforms, or you have a blogging platform where you want to host in Azure, you can do that. Now, let's look into some of the benefit and features of API apps and some example. API apps allows you to give you an option for API management, which is a full lifecycle API management, including versioning and monitoring. You have seamless integration with Logic Apps and Power Automate and other Azure services. These APIs you can support. These APIs can support various authentication methods like OAuth or JWT and AD, etc. Some of the examples of Azure API apps include host multiple microservices architecture with independent scalable APIs. You can develop robust backend to support your mobile application, or you can create and manage APIs for your IoT applications as well. Let's look into question number 17. What is Azure App Service and what are its key benefits? Here we are trying to understand Azure App Service key benefits. We kind of touched upon what is Azure App Service. We have to go in detail about some of the benefits so that you are understood about these benefits. Let's populate the answer. So Azure App Service primarily offer these two types of scaling. So you need to understand these scaling. One is vertical scaling, another one is horizontal scaling. So what is this vertical scaling? Vertical scaling involves increasing or decreasing the size of the app service plan. For example, you can move from basic plan to a premium plan to gain more resources such as memory, CPU, storage. This is ideal for applications that need more power to handle increased workload. Second option is horizontal scaling or auto scale. This allows you to automatically add or remove instances based on a predefined metric such as CPU, memory, or traffic thresholds. This ensures that your application can handle varying loads efficiently without any sort of manual intervention. Overall, the main auto scaling benefit are for giving you high availability and cost efficiency for your Azure App Service. Let's look at question number 18. This is a scenario based question. Most of your interview questions are going to be something like this. So this question asks like, hey, your company is launching an API that will have unpredictable traffic spikes. How do you configure your Azure App Service for scalability? Here the interviewer is trying to understand, do you know how to configure it? Do you know what are the features of Azure App Services which you can use, which will allow scalability and which will take care of any sort of traffic spike? So this is a really good question. So let me populate the short answer first, then I'll give you the explanation. First, to handle this, Azure App Service offer you auto scaling. You can deploy the service to multiple regions, or you can enable caching. At the same time, you can always look into the performance monitor to look at the unpredictable traffic spikes, things like that. So let me give you a bit more explanation so that you understand it all clearly. Let's go through this one by one. First, how do you explain, or first of all, how do you understand this auto scaling? So auto scaling can be used to automatically increase or decrease the number of instances based on a particular metric, and these metrics can be a CPU or a memory usage. So when you configure this, this ensures that your application can handle varying traffic loads effectively. So if I can give you an example, you can configure auto scaling rules to add instances when CPU usage exceed 70% and remove instances when it drops below 30%. That's how the auto scaling works. The next example is, or the next feature which you should be talking about is ability to deploy these app service in multiple regions. So you can use Azure Traffic Manager that can be used to distribute the request across multiple regions. So this is not only reduces the latency but also provides redundancy in case of regional failures. An example you can supplement is you can deploy application in both East US and in Singapore to serve customers in both sides of the world. Another feature which you can highlight is enabling caching. So, what is this caching? Azure provides you with a service called Azure Redis Cache. I don't know whether I'm even pronouncing it right. It spells like REDIS, Redis. So you can use that to store frequently accessed data in memory that will reduce the load of your database and improving performance. So example of how you can use that is you can cache the result of a frequent database query to spread up the response time for repeated requests. Another feature you can highlight is the performance monitoring. You can utilize Azure Monitor to gain real-time insight into your application performances. Azure Monitor allows you to set up alerts to notify you of any sort of potential issues because they impact users. So how can you use it? You can create alert for high response time or failed request so that notifies you so you can quickly identify and address these problems. So that's how you will address this. And there is a part where it asks about Azure App Service for scalability. You can mention things like some of the benefits of Azure App Service include high availability because it automatically adjusts the number of instances to maintain the application availability. Then it offers cost efficiency because it allows you to optimize cost by scaling down the instances during the low traffic periods. Let's look at question number 19. What are deployment slots in Azure App Service? So let me populate the short answer. First, the deployment slots allow you to deploy multiple versions of an application within the same app service. This particular feature is invaluable for developers and DevOps teams as it enables staging, testing, and production workflows within a single instance. What you are looking at below are some of the key benefits of deployment slots. First is blue-green deployments. So with these blue-green deployments, you can test new updates in a staging slot before swapping to production. This ensures that any new changes are verified before going live. This process significantly reduces the risk of introducing bugs into your production environment. Another key benefit is zero downtime deployments. This helps you swap slots with no downtime, and users continue to access the application without any interruption, providing a seamless experience during the updates. And another feature or the benefit is rollback support. So if an update causes any particular issue, you can swap back instantly to the previous version. So this capability ensures that any problematic deployments can be quickly undone, thus minimizing the impact on users. Other benefits you can highlight is the configuration isolation, traffic redirection, things like that. Some of the example of deployment slot usage are you can use it for feature testing or load testing or hotfix deployment, things like that. Let's go to the next question. Next question is question number 20. What authentication and security features does Azure App Service provide? Here the interviewer is trying to gauge your understanding in terms of do you know in depth about Azure App Service, particularly the security features. So let's populate the short answer. So Azure App Service provide a lot of built-in security features. Some of the things are what you see on the screen right now. So let me take you through one by one. First, help them understand that Azure App Service provide built-in security features designed to protect your web applications and data. And some of the key features are this. And let me help you understand one by one. First one is authentication and authorization. So tell that Azure App Service support multiple identity providers such as Azure Active Directory. Now it is known as Entra ID. You can sign in with Google, Facebook, that is known as Meta, a Microsoft account, per Twitter, and things like that. Looks like all of these companies changed their name recently. And this allows you to authenticate users seamlessly. Second is with this authentication authorization, this allows you to configure access control policies to manage and restrict user access to your application, who have access to modify anything. Second feature you can highlight is SSL TLS encryption. Using this, it will automatically secures your application traffic with HTTPS by ensuring that all data transmitted between the server and the client are encrypted at all the time. So this provisions and manage custom domain SSL TLS certificates easily. Next is private networking. So if you look into private networking, this allows you to utilize the VNet integration to connect your application service to your Azure virtual network so that you can isolate your app from the public internet. So we talked about the network security group creating VNets. So this is exactly leveraging the VNet and the network security group to create a secure environment or a private networking environment for your application. Additionally, you can use private link to ensure that your web app is accessible only via private endpoints, and that will enhance your security even further. The next security feature you can highlight is managed identity. So, what is managed identity? This will enable your application to securely access other Azure resources like Azure Key Vault, Azure Storage, and Azure SQL Database without the need to manage credentials. So, this provides a way to authenticate to services that support Azure AD authentication natively. So these are some of the top security features you can highlight. There are some additional security features I can suggest, or you can say that you can use Azure firewall rules to configure IP restrictions to allow and deny traffic from a specific IP address range, or you can suggest things like app service environment, or it is known as ASE, that provides a fully isolated, dedicated environment for securely running your application at high scale. Other feature is advanced threat protection that you can use to detect and mitigate any sort of potential threats by providing real-time alerts and recommendation. But if you feel like those are quite far-fetched and complex, just stick with these four primary security features provided by Azure App Service by default.